Hello and welcome to another video. So, back in 2008, if you were on a very strict budget, this is probably a system that you would have built back then. However, 11 years later, it hasn't aged very well. But the big question here is, can you play modern-ish games on this budget PC from around 11 years ago? Now, the reason I say budget is because the specifications in it, well, there are some good parts of it, but it's all pretty poop. So, we're going to go through each individual part, and then we're going to play some games, and let's see if this can play modern games or not. Now, do keep in mind that as you watch this video, normally whenever I do voiceovers, I do usually have a script that I try to at least loosely follow. I'm too lazy to put a script, so there's no script here, so just bear with me. So, let's talk about the components inside this system. So, we'll go over them one by one, and then we will benchmark the system. So, for the CPU, we have an Intel Core 2 Quad Q9300. It is a 4-core, 4-threaded CPU at 2.5 gigahertz. Now, the CPU is one of the higher end Core 2 quads, but honestly all Core 2 quads are basically dead for modern gaming. It's possible for maybe like esports, but for anything more intense than that, it's just a real no-go. And also, if you notice how the rotation of the CPU cooler, it's a long story, but basically took off the cooler when I got to replace the thermal paste. Then I broke one of the clips trying to get it back on the normal way, and the way that it's rotating now is the only way that I could get it to stay on correctly without it having to like fall off or whatever. But yeah, it's not the best rotation in my opinion, but it is still keep the CPU under like 65 degrees under load, so I say it works pretty well. Next, we have the motherboard. This is a Gigabyte GA-EP43 whatever motherboard. This motherboard is pretty basic, although it does have all of the features that you would need for LGA 775, including an LGA 775 socket, which is the most important, up to 16 gigs of DDR2 RAM support, all of the external connectivity you would need, including SATA and IDE ports. Incredible feature, and it even is overclockable. It is an overclockable motherboard. I didn't overclock the CPU, but if you get this board, you can. So that's a pretty good selling feature, in my opinion. But yeah, jokes aside, this is just a pretty basic board. It also doesn't have that interesting of I/O. It just has 2 PS2 ports, some special audio jacks, 8 USB 2.0 ports, and some more audio jacks. Next is the RAM. We have two gigabyte DDR2 sticks in this nice blue color. This isn't anything special. Runs at 800 megahertz, and yeah, for modern gaming, you want at least 8 as the minimum. But because of our incredible graphics card, we won't be able to play any modern games on this. Spoiler alert. So the 4 gigs of RAM should be okay. Speaking of, let's talk about that graphics card. This graphics card is probably the best that you could choose for 2008, and that's a lie. It is an NVIDIA GeForce GT 210 1GB. This card, it's not good. It does have good real connectivity, you know, DVI, HDMI, VGA. It's a good combination of both modern and legacy connectors, so if you want to use this as a display adapter for multiple monitors, it's a pretty good solution. But if you want to play any games on it, especially modern ones, that's going to be a no-go, as even if the card could start the newer games, it wouldn't even be powerful enough to run them, and this card only supports up to DirectX 10.1, so that's kind of out of the question. Next, we have our drives. We have 2 drives. We have I believe it is a Seagate, I don't remember the brand exactly, but I believe it is a Seagate 160 gigabyte hard drive. Pretty basic hard drive, and probably would have came with Windows Vista or Windows 7 when this computer was built. But yeah, it's a pretty basic 7200 RPM SATA 2 hard drive. And then also we have the drive that makes this entire system worth what I paid for, which was $50. But this is an LG Blu-ray reader, and this is a pretty advanced drive, and even still today, Blu-ray drives go for about $30-40, so that's basically almost what I've bought the thing for, which is pretty neat, because I almost technically got the rest of the parts for $10 if I were to sell off that Blu-ray drive. But that's a pretty neat drive, so I'm gonna keep that in the system. Yeah, I don't know if I plan on selling this system or not, but anyways, finally we have the power supply, which is a questionable, and I just voice cracked there hard, but it's a questionable Solid Gear 500 watt power supply. Now, never used a Solid Gear and I've never heard of them, but I've had this thing running for about 2 weeks and it's still running perfectly fine, and I assume that power supply is 10 years old, so yeah, it's doing pretty well for a power supply that I've never heard of before. So if their power supplies are super cheap, I might use them in like as like a replacement power supply for an old system. So that is all of the parts inside of this system. The case is a pretty basic Cooler Master case with nothing special, just some front USB and FireWire ports. But for testing, I have a SSD, a 240 gig SSD with all my games and stuff pre-downloaded on it, so that I don't have to re-download them and enjoy my -2 megabits per second internet connection. So we're going to be doing all of the testing on that. The full specifications will be appearing on screen, and then after that we will do some benchmarks. So I hope you enjoy that.
Feliz Navidad, Feliz Navidad, Feliz Navidad, próspero año y felicidad. Feliz Navidad, Feliz Navidad, Feliz Navidad, próspero año y felicidad. I wanna wish you a Merry Christmas. I wanna wish you a Merry Christmas. I wanna wish you a Merry Christmas from the bottom of my heart.
So, in conclusion, is this a good system for playing modern games? No. It can barely run CSGO. It runs it just as well as like my laptop does, which is from 2015, I believe. But, yeah, the only games it does run really well are like really old games from like the early 2000s, like Battlefield 1942. That ran pretty well. And also Minecraft ran fairly well, even though it did get a minimum of 0 FPS. There was a little bit of stutter in the beginning of that Skywars game, but other than that, it was perfectly fine. But yeah, all the other games, Rocket League, CSGO, they just wouldn't play nicely with this system. So if you were to price this system out, and if you wanted to rebuild this system exactly how this is, you know, give or take some things, because in the list I have a new hard drive, a modern case, but yeah, so in total, this system would cost you about $220. That's a horrible value, especially for a system with a GT210. Like, you could build a system with like a i5 2500 and like a GTX 700 series, and for around the same price, it'd be way better than this. Now, I do have plans to upgrade this system. I don't know if I'll go through with them or not, but what I'm planning on doing is upgrading the RAM to 8 gigs of RAM, getting a permanent like 120 gig SSD installed in there to replace the 160 gig hard drive, and I might add my Radeon HD 6870, which was used in my $100 gaming PC build. I decided to maybe use this GPU because it's powerful enough to where it can run DX11 and play modern games fairly okay, but it's not too powerful to where it'll be held back that much by the CPU. I don't know if I'll go through these plans or not, but you know, I have plans for it. So yeah, I just decided to price it out for fun, how much it would cost exactly to rebuild this, like if you wanted to replica this. But I wouldn't recommend it. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, definitely leave a like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in another video. And in case if I don't upload a video before Christmas, I'm just going to say Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.